Welcome to the Steelers Breakdown podcast featuring PennLive Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh. Nick is fresh from that big win in D.C., and he's also fresh from the Mike Tomlin press conference as the loquacious coach previews the opening of the division slate against AFC North nemesis, the Baltimore Ravens. But back to that big win. It had everything: moon balls from Russell Wilson, acrobatic catches from George Pickens, and of course, the newly added Mike Williams providing the coup de grace, the winning touchdown on a play they didn't even practice. And then there was that hard count from hell that caused the Commanders to jump and the Steelers to run out the clock. But in the euphoria after a win like that, and it was a stirring win, an entertaining game, great to watch, things can get lost. So that's why we turn to the trained eye of Nick Farabaugh to tell us, okay, what were the positive signs that were on display in that game, but also flaws that remain, either with coaching schemes or in the play of some of the players in that game. So Nick is here to break it all down, to sort of give us the good and the bad, to sort of temper the enthusiasm, because that's a kind of win in Steelers Nation that turns hope into belief. So should we believe, Nick? Should we believe?
I think there's a lot to be really excited about. I don't think, I don't know if I'm going to temper your excitement much when I talk, because I do think there's a lot to be really excited about. And I truly believe it shouldn't have been as close as it was either. Now, obviously the fake punt basically spotted them seven. And then so that is a little bit unfortunate. But you look at the stats from this game. I mean, the Steelers had better success rates on both sides of the football, which is always really good. That means they were the more efficient team overall. And more importantly to me, that I thought was really kind of cool was the defense sticking up against what is a really good offense. I know, they're allowed 27, but they allowed a season low yardage to the Commanders. The Commanders, this was the worst game of Jaden Daniels' career, probably by a wide margin on tape. And the receivers obviously for the Commanders dropped a few passes too. I think if there's one concern I'm going to raise, there's two concerns I'll raise out of this game to start out, and then we'll get into the positives because there's just so many to talk about. So the two concerns I would say is when the Steelers are in man coverage, I thought that they left guys open. I thought that there were opportunities the Commanders left on the field, and I believe the Ravens are going to try and copy the exact game plan that the Commanders tried on these crossing routes because they have guys to do it. You talk about Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, Deontay Johnson. You could throw Andrews and Likely in there as well. But that's something to think about. And I thought actually the biggest offender of this entire thing was Cam Sutton. I know he played 19 snaps in his first game back, had only 3 targets. When you look at the stat sheet, it's going to be 0-0. 0 receptions allowed, 0 yards allowed, but he allowed 3 guys to get open on all 3 of his targets. On all 3 of the targets, there was either a drop, a misplaced pass, and it wasn't like he lays like tight window contested. It was just wide open. And so that wasn't good, but first game rust, maybe he's going to get better. We'll see. That was just concerning to me overall. He just had guys running by him on those 3 plays in man coverage. Now, the Steelers played a lot more man because one of the positives I want to highlight, John, is that they're blitzing more and they are doing more schematically than they had done. Talking about Cam Sutton, the other importance of Cam Sutton is that he is able to unlock different things they do on the back end. They can disguise different coverages because he can play slot, he can play dime back, he can play outside corner, he can play safety. So they can do a lot of different things. So you can move Minka Fitzpatrick around. You can do a lot of cool stuff there. So I thought that was important. And they blitzed or sent 5 or more rushers 19 times in this game. That's a season high by far. Their second highest was against the Giants, 11. So you can see the trend. The trend is starting to go. They're starting to blitz. They're starting to at least get a little bit more into their bag schematically. Defensively, we talked about that, how they were very vanilla, very basic early in the season. They are getting a little bit more further along, which is important for the Steelers. They need to be more unpredictable defensively, and I thought they were on Sunday. The other concern that I had was I just thought at times the offense was pretty up and down. Like the offense can score, obviously, right? We saw them drive down the field a few times. They obviously had a drive that ended at the 1 yard line in a fumble. So, maybe you could have had 7 more, right? But they there was that period there where they just kept kind of going, 3 and out, or first down and then a punt. They can get into spurts where they go real cold, and the defense, sometimes goes into spurts when they're real cold, and I think that's going to have to be something that the Steelers kind of, if they want to be a Super Bowl contender, right? I think this group looks like a group that can win a playoff game or two. But if they want to win it all, which is obviously the goal, they got to play a full 60 minutes, just a full 60 minutes. And I just don't think they've done that yet. There were a lot of mistakes in that game that the Steelers left out there. The fake punt drop, the fumble by Jalen Warren at the 1 yard line, the defensive end of the half, and then the start of the half. Allowing the Commanders to double up on them is really bad stuff. So I thought that was infuriating. I also thought, Joey Porter Jr.'s
Let me ask you
penalties.
a question though about that
Yeah.
those periods of the offensive malaise that you talked about. What do you blame that on? Is there any? Yeah,
It's a bunch of different things. Receivers not getting open because Mike Williams played 9 snaps in this game. So you didn't really have him out there a ton. I thought the O-line struggled a little bit there. I think Russ in that period that I'm talking about got sacked. I think both of his sacks came in that period. So I thought that was a little concerning. They just doubled Pickens, and I didn't feel like for about 2 or 3 drives there, the Steelers weren't really moving Pickens around. They were kind of keeping him on the outside, and it allowed the Commanders to really cloud him and force anybody else to win. And then they would kind of bracket Freiermuth in the middle of the field on top of that. So it was really like, okay, either Russ is going to have to dump it off to the running back, but the Steelers were trying to keep in the running back because the protection schemes were down, or you're going to have to get Calvin Austin or Van Jefferson a win. And Jefferson wasn't open. Russ clearly, I think, has more trust right now in Calvin Austin, and tried to get to him, and Austin just had an off day. And so I thought that was a big part of it. And then they couldn't run the ball. That was the other thing, right? It was obvious passing situations in that little bit of areas, but they can obviously move the ball. And I think they can move it in different ways at different times, but they do run hot and cold at times. But they are an offense that can get explosive. The thing that sticks out to me when they were at, 2nd and 20, a 34-yard pop for George Pickens, right? They had that big play. 3rd and 9 on the game-winning touchdown, right? That's a big-time play. I remember, and I think this is kind of the sequence that defines the Steelers' offense to me is, they get to 2nd and 16, right? They on the final drive, just go ahead. They get a false start and then a 1 yard loss, and it's 2nd and 16, and then Russ kind of creates magic. And I think that's a big part of it. I thought Russell Wilson, and this is where we get into the positives, I think we see Russell Wilson going out there each week and elevating people around him. The mark of a good quarterback that can win you playoff games is not do they just go along for the ride and kind of guide you to victory, but do they guide you to victory? And then when you need extraordinary efforts and plays, can they do it? I thought the biggest play of the game offensively that's not talked about, obviously the touchdown pass and everything, is that 2nd and 16 where he breaks out of the pocket, breaks 2 tackles, goes across the field, and hits Calvin Austin for 12 yards. And it was a really good catch by Austin, too. He got hurt on the play. He got sandwiched, made the catch, and that made it 3rd and 4, and then they converted on 3rd down, Pat Freiermuth, and obviously in the next series they hit Mike Williams for the touchdown. I just think that this is a team that picks each other up really well, right? You look at it, right? I just look at the special teams unit as a microcosm of this. So the fake punt doesn't work, obviously, but then I really like Corliss Waitman, the punter, because he's really fun. It's really fun having a lefty punter. He's been awesome this year, obviously. But a lefty punter, their spin, their spiral, it looks different to a returner. And Olamide Zaccheaus, who is the Commander's returner, is a pretty good returner. He's been doing this for a long time. But you don't see many lefty punters. And so when that spiral comes down differently, it's harder to catch, right? And he muffs it. The Steelers get it, obviously. And they basically spot out 7. And so they basically cancel out the fake punt, which is really good stuff. I think that stuff is complementary football. I think, when it's 24-14 and the defense has just given up 2 straight touchdown drives, I think the response by the Steelers offense to then go down the field and score a touchdown to make it 24-21, really good stuff. Then the offense goes back into a cold spell. The punting game, Waitman has like 1 bad punt, which is the first bad punt he's had in like 9 weeks. They start at the 42-yard line,
Mhm.
and it's 2nd and 10. Cam Hayward gets a huge sack. That was a big play. So your defense then picks up your offense, which set you up with bad field position. And I thought that was just really, all these things were really important. That you're picking up complementary football. When the defense is down, the offense is helping out. And, when the defense needs to get it stopped, they did. The special teams helped themselves out. I thought all of this was really important for the team. They are a team that is playing together as a complementary group. Now, it's not all pretty, as we talked about. Sometimes they go a little hot and cold on each side. Sometimes they have specific issues in these certain areas. But I think that they have good players. They're talented, and they look solidly well coached. I think all of this comes together to create that they are a good team. I think the ceiling of this group, we don't know yet. I think this week is going to be very important in that. We'll figure that out as well. When they face the Eagles and the Chiefs and the Bengals and all these other teams, we don't know what the ceiling of the team is. But I very comfortably am sitting here today saying to you that this team has a good offense, a good defense, and good special teams. I think all three units are good across the board. They are above average. I think it's the first time you can say that since probably 2020 when they went 11-0 to start the year. But this team has a chance to be better than that team, which lost in the wild card round and fell off a cliff at the end of the season. I just think that there's more sustainable factors to this. They consistently get explosive plays on consistent plays. Russell Wilson isn't just heaving and praying balls to George Pickens. I mean, he's throwing moon balls, but these moon balls are beautifully placed. The sideline catch by Pickens on the drive that unfortunately ended in the fumble, I think was Russ's best throw of the game. I know the touchdown to Williams is beautiful, but you go back and watch that throw. It was a gorgeous pass. So there's just so much going for that offense. The defense is talented enough and is definitely disruptive enough. I think that is where this team's potential lies in the higher ceiling. I don't think it's the offense. I think the offense is kind of figuring it out. We kind of know now the offense is where it is going to be a solid offense. But this defense right now is playing like a top 10 defense. I want them to play like a top 3 defense. That's kind of what I want them to be undisputed top 3 in every category. They are top 3 in a lot of categories, points allowed, the big ones, right? Turnovers. But I want to see them just snuff out. I want 3 and outs. I want that first half before the fake punt, right? When the Commanders in that first quarter were just going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. That's the Steelers defense you look at and you say, oh yeah, that's a dominant defense. If you can maintain that, that's where you can get really special. And I think that they have spurts where they are really dominant up front.
Let me ask you about that fake punt, because even though it didn't work, obviously the Steelers saw something in the Commanders and they had practiced that play. Did you like the call, and what did they see? What were they trying to exploit there?
Yeah, I think this is good coaching, actually. I don't have a problem with this. And so let me explain kind of why I don't have a problem with this. So when you look at the play, the Commanders do something where they kind of sag off the gunners. Usually there's a man up on a gunner on the outside, but they bring the jammer down from the outside and line them up outside the wings just to get an extra person to pressure the punter, right? They're trying to get a punt block. And the Steelers are backed up, obviously, near their own end zone in that scenario. And they've done that a lot. And so the Steelers built in a check. This isn't a Commander-specific check. This is any team that does this. There was nobody within 20 yards of James Pierre. He's wide open. And they built in a check where if they see that, they snap the ball to Miles Killebrew, who is the up back, and he throws it out to Pierre. They've done this in practice many times. They've done it many times before. And they prepared specifically this week for this because the Commanders do it consistently. And it's a good way to kind of back off that pressure towards your punter, because hit them with the big play, then they have to respect it. You can't send extra pressure. It all works out, right? You don't want them being able to tee off on your protection schemes and try and get blocks. And so this is a really well thought out play. I know it, people will point to it being, 4th and 15 at your own 15, but Pierre catches this ball. I mean, he is a chance to go all the way. The return man is right there, but he can easily catch it, stop, and go. And I think that's why he dropped the ball. I think he was kind of thinking about his next move after the catch. So I have no problem with the process of it. I think it's a good coaching. I like it. But obviously when you don't execute it, that's the issue. But it's not like you threw it to a rookie, right? Miles Killebrew's an all-pro special teamer. He's your special teams captain. James Pierre is a very good gunner and a 5th-year veteran. that has been around for a very long time in the system. So it's not like you were throwing it to the rookie or you were throwing it to a, and someone said, why didn't they design that for Ben Skowronek? Well, it's not your call, right? It's whoever the other team kind of backs off. So yeah, would it have been ideal if they had backed off Ben Skowronek on the other side because he's a wide receiver? Sure, but that's not how it went out. And so generally, that's just the scheme behind that. It's a check. Danny Smith and Mike Tomlin didn't go to the team before that play and say we are faking it. It was a check that they saw and it was built in. It's just good coaching to answers, and I understand it's at the 15-yard line, but that is a call that you make regardless of your positional your position on the football field. So, yeah, it's a tough one to swallow, but let's be real here. If he catches that football, everyone's calling it the genius move of the week. And I think that's just a sign of a well-coached team that they were prepared for a scenario like that. And so I wouldn't give them any grief. Obviously, they signed, they kind of gave the Commanders 7 points as a result of that. And the real answer to what you go if you're a coach is just catch the football. Right. Just execute. You have to have trust in your guys. And again, they gave it to probably the two most trustworthy dudes on that unit. So I don't have a problem with it. And that's kind of the thought process behind that.
Hey, great explanation. And I like the call too. I think it was great coaching and great recognition by the special teams that was on the field to go ahead and do it. So I say, don't leave the bullet in the chamber, and they fired their gun. So now turning to the Ravens, I heard a lot of the post-game commentary where, some people were comparing Jaden Daniels, the Commanders quarterback, who's a rookie, with Lamar Jackson because, they're mobile quarterbacks, and the Steelers seem to have an answer for Jaden Daniels. But Mike Tomlin really didn't appreciate that. And, a rookie compared to a multi-MVP winner, and he referred to Jackson as Mr. Jackson. So is there any, from what you saw, in terms of what the Steelers did to Daniels and what they're probably going to plan for Lamar Jackson, is there any carryover there?
Yes, there is a similar carryover. So here's the impressive thing about what the Steelers did. Coming into this game, the Commanders were the second best rushing offense in football. First is obviously the Ravens, which is interesting. But they were the second best rushing offense in football in yards per game. They were fourth in success rate. They were top in all those metrics, John. Now, they had 3 rushing touchdowns against the Steelers, but they only ran for 60 yards, 22 carries for 60 yards. And Jay Daniels, who had the most scramble yards in the NFL this year, had 3 carries for 5 yards. Most of those came on a read option that went 4 yards. Patrick Queen made a great ranging play. He had 2 QB draws that were snuffed out, excluding on the last drive, by the way. The most unspoken play of the game was Keanu Benton having that 1 yard stop. But what they do against these mobile quarterbacks is they just tell the edge rushers to go hit the quarterback. So TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, instead of caring about what that running back's going to do, just fire up field and hit Daniels and Lamar or whoever, right? This has been their thing for Lamar. They never let Lamar go unscathed. They don't ever let him have the edge to himself. They will let a Ravens running back go on them, but they will not let Lamar Jackson get on them. And it's led to Lamar being, pretty banged up throughout the game because he's continuously getting hit at the mesh point. And sometimes when that happens, fatigue sets in, or he makes a bad read because he's all frazzled and just gets smacked all game. But it doesn't allow Lamar to get off on these big explosive runs. Jaden Daniels, in a way, is kind of like a young Lamar because he is so reliant on his legs. Now, that doesn't mean he's not great with his arm. He is great with his arm already. And Lamar was great with his arm when he was young, too. Lamar has turned into more of a passer first, even at this point. And he has not lost a bit of his dynamic ability to run. I don't want to kind of give off the impression that I'm saying that because he is dynamic when he runs, but he's not really looking to run as much anymore. And when he runs, it's to extend, right? It is to do what Russell Wilson does, which is to extend, but he can still jet. And so what the Steelers are going to do is what they've always done against Lamar Jackson on these zone reads. And they are going to try and go up and hit him. And they are going to send their edge rushers and hit him. And TJ Watt is so special that sometimes he's able to read where it's going to go anyways and tackle the running back while going at Lamar. And that's just a luxury of having TJ Watt. But Highsmith is also very explosive at doing this. This is a great thing for a guy like Nick Herbig, who's going to be back this week, where he is so explosive it can just fire uphill. And, you'd rather him not be on the edge anyways if he was going to tackle Derrick Henry. Now, that's the big wrinkle in all of this, right? This is the difference. So the Steelers before, were tackling J.K. Dobbins and Latavius Murray and Justice Hill and all these other guys that you knew were Ravens running backs. Gus Edwards, right? Gus Edwards was the power back forever for these Ravens teams. And he had a few nice games against the Steelers. So what the Steelers were able to do against the Commanders is what they're going to want to do this week. Eckler, McNichols, and those running backs were not able to kill them on the ground. They just weren't. They had, 2 or 3, 4 runs that were kind of big hits, right? 9, 10, 11 yards. And the Steelers will live with that at times. They're going to live with that if you can do that. But Derrick Henry is a different animal. You know how different King Henry is. And that's what has made them so dangerous. Because here's the thing, every defensive coordinator that has tried to play Derrick Henry first gets absolutely crushed by Lamar's arm. They just do. Everybody that has tried to play Lamar first gets crushed by 22. And so that's the big thing. How do you stop Lamar, with his arm and his legs while not letting Derrick Henry kill you on the ground? But how do you stop if you do stop Derrick Henry? How do you stop Lamar? It's the biggest conundrum, and they have so many weapons for Lamar to throw to. Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, Nelson Aguilar, Rashad Bateman, Deontay Johnson. Now they are so deep in the skill groups that it is so hard to get at them. The only way that you really can get at them, and that has slowed them down this year at any points, has been to just dominate them up front. Dominate their offensive line, make Lamar a little jittery, do not give Derrick Henry wide open lanes to run through. And the Steelers do have a defensive line, even without Alex Highsmith. I think not having Alex Highsmith with this ankle injury is a blow. But they are still going to have a nice edge rusher rotation with Herbig back. Preston Smith is there, obviously, now. He had a nice first game. And they have an interior defensive line that can hold up and beat that Ravens offensive line up. And that's going to be the biggest thing. They're going to have to win the kind of war of attrition up front. And so there are definitely things I think that they could take away from that performance against the Commanders. When they were at their best against the Commanders offense, I thought the Steelers' edge rushers and interior defensive line were consistently able to pressure him. He got smacked over and over again. They got some free rushers too. Guys like Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts, Deshaun Elliott, and Beanie Bishop coming in and getting free hits on Jaden Daniels. You just want to get hits on Lamar, and you want to kind of make him make tough throws. Now, he can do it, but you want to make those degree of difficulty as high as possible at any point. And so there's a lot to go with here, but there's a huge conundrum with this Ravens offense. It is, in my opinion, John, the best offense in football. So we'll see. This is the test of the season for the Steelers defensively. If they come out here and are able to slow down the Ravens this week, I think that speaks a lot to what this defense can do in their ceiling.
Interesting stuff, and kind of scary when you put it that way, especially with Mr. Henry coming right at you. But I got to note something that Tomlin said in a news conference, and you tweeted out about Deontay Johnson, the former Steeler. And Tomlin really seemed to take a shot at him. He said something about, well, I don't really worry about Deontay because there's more significant pieces with larger roles, referring to the other receivers and the other weapons which you ticked through on the team. Was he getting personal there? What was that all about?
Mike Tomlin has mastered the ability to be so professional while taking digs. It's not even funny. This is probably a slight dig. It is. But it's also kind of masks as a completely factual statement. It is completely factual. In 2 games, Deontay Johnson has 1 reception for 6 yards. He has played a combined 33 snaps. He just is not on film very much through 2 games. So everybody I just named, right? Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, Nelson Aguilar, the running backs, Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, and of course Lamar.
Right.
You are more worried about them than you were worried about Deontay Johnson. He has just not been a big enough part of the offense. I mean, I'm sure they're worried about him peripherally, but he is not even a top 5 concern on this offense. He's not the biggest concern in the wide receiver room. That's Zay Flowers. I mean, he's the wide receiver one, and so it probably is a slight dig. Mike can be a little petty. I know he can be, but I also acknowledge the fact that that is absolutely factually correct. Everything he said is not false. He does not show up on their tape very much, and so I don't think you would be super worried about him. When his one catch last week against the Bengals, he caught it before halftime, and they were trying to set up a long field goal attempt, and he didn't get it out of bounds in time, and the clock ran out, and they didn't get it. So, we know, if you know Deontay Johnson, the Steelers know Deontay Johnson. It is obvious that any given week he can absolutely implode, or any other week he can go completely off. But I think the Steelers know what Deontay Johnson is. I think they know how the Ravens are going to utilize him, because I don't think it's very hard to understand how they're going to utilize him. And so I think if Deontay is a big-time focal point of the offense and ends up becoming a bigger part, I think the Steelers will be prepared for it. I guess that statement by Tomlin kind of does a double act there. It acts as two things at once, John. So, yeah, good on Mike T there for getting in a little pettiness while also being completely factually correct about what he said.
I like it. And Deontay certainly has disappeared on my fantasy team. I'll just leave it at that. The other thing I'm hearing is, looking at past performance, and, a lot of fans, at least, kind of think that the Steelers have Lamar Jackson's number. I mean, he doesn't have a winning record against the Steelers. He hasn't flashed the brilliance that he's flashed in other games. But as you're telling us, this was before, of course, Derrick Henry joined that team and making it a pick your poison proposition for the defense. And also Lamar tending to want to throw first rather than run. So are all bets off in terms of the past subpar performance of Jackson against the Steelers?
I'd say so. Listen, I know like I said, the game plan for them is very simple. I kind of outlined it for you. But I also remember that game last year at home. And you remember this crazy game, right? This is, in my opinion, the most... I have never seen a receiving room destroy a quarterback more. Lamar in that game was dotting the Steelers up, and receivers were running wide open for most of this game, and they just kept dropping the ball. Zay Flowers had 2 drops in that game. Aguilar dropped a touchdown. It was absolutely the most crazy. I've never seen a quarterback be sabotaged more by his weapons than that game. And so he has, in my opinion, at least put a game on tape where he can absolutely dice them up, but everybody else better keep their head on. I mean, in this game, he went 22 of 38 with 0 touchdowns, a pick, 4 rushes for 26 yards. I mean, this is not a great stat line. He only threw for 236, and it doesn't say half of what he did in that game. He was really good, but the Ravens wide receivers were credited with 13 drops in that game. 13 drops. That is absurd. So I think that they do have something figured out for Lamar, right? He doesn't really ever destroy them on the ground necessarily. And I think they have kind of an ability to change the picture on him at times to get him into bad situations. He's thrown a good deal of picks against them. So I think they kind of understand his tendencies, and it's a cat and mouse game. But Lamar has somehow this year, John, I mean, he has leveled up again. I mean, he looks great. He 2-time MVP already. He's probably the favorite right now, in my opinion, to win the MVP. But yeah, he is right now playing at a very high level. So we'll see. I think that they do have a plan, as I talked about. I think they have a very specific plan for Lamar because very minimal amount of teams charge up field like they do with their edge rushers. A lot of them just don't have the talent to do it, for one, on the interior and trust the guys behind them. But the Steelers do. And so they have a unique plan and they have unique variations of their coverages that they do to attack him, to bait him into interceptions. So they do have a specific plan that they kind of use to try and minimize. But just because they did in the past doesn't mean they're going to do it again. Because I remember that game last year, Week 5 in Pittsburgh, where Lamar should have had a much better stat line if his wide receivers didn't completely just decombust. Here's the issue, though, John. Basically, every single wide receiver from that game that completely just sabotaged him is also his wide receivers now. So just think about that. Zay Flowers is a really good player. I think Rashad Bateman's a solid player. Again, I think Deontay's good. Nelson Aguilar's a very good wide receiver for, and they have two very good tight ends. But they did completely self destruct last time, and these games have all been. I think most of these games, these last few games, are the Steelers Ravens rivalry. It's always close. It's probably going to be close, and you do kind of wonder based on some of the issues that they have had in the past, right? Some of the close games that these Ravens have lost against the Steelers in the past. You remember, the Sunday night game where they tried to go for two to win it and didn't get the 2-point conversion. The Steelers win. You think about just missed opportunities from the Ravens, and you kind of wonder if that's going to be in their head a little bit, or if that big play needs to happen at some point. Is that guy going to drop it? It is something where, like with the Steelers Ravens, I'm almost at the point where I just need to see the Ravens make that play because I think they're going to have to. I don't think they're going to boat race. I don't think anybody's boat racing anybody in this game. This is going to be, I think, a close one, and it's going to be who's going to make that big play. And can the Ravens do it? I think that's going to be a big one.
And one thing about the Ravens, this version of the Ravens, their defense has been suspect, especially in the fourth quarter, and they've lost some leads in the fourth quarter. So, Nick, you've given us a ton of great analysis. Now give us your best forecast for how you think this game is going to unfold Sunday at 1:00 at Acrisure Stadium. What do you see happening?
Yeah, this Ravens pass defense has been really bad, really bad. They're allowing 295 yards per game. That is the worst in the NFL. It's interesting because they are not necessarily a team that kind of is there as a group, specifically that is allows a ton of separation. They only allow about 3 yards per separation. That's not great, but it's not super high. It's middle of the pack. Like they are not some. They're allowing a lot of contested catches. Their corners have been awful at the catch point, just awful at the catch point. And if that doesn't sound like a bad omen, it should, because the Steelers throw the go balls all the time down the sidelines. George Pickens and Mike Williams have to be incredibly excited about that. And this group of corners and secondary, it shouldn't be bad on paper. Kyle Hamilton's playing very well. He's a great player, but he might not play. He's got an ankle injury. Kind of we'll see, I guess. Marcus Williams has just fallen off a cliff out of nowhere. It was a great free safety. I don't know what happened there. But they have, Brandon Stevens is a real problem for the Ravens, not for other teams. He gets picked on way too much. Marlon Humphrey is, Marlon Humphrey. You know him. Nate Wiggins is a really solid rookie corner. He's fast. He's got great ball skills, but he also is very skinny and he has issues with bigger receivers. Again, does that not bring alarm bells up to you when the Steelers are going to have George Pickens and Mike Williams? This pass defense is definitely an issue. And here's the other issue. Their tackling in space has been an issue. You can get them kind of underneath and on slants. They allow the third most yak in the NFL this year. To those catches. That is a big time issue. They got a lot of pressure on Joe Burrow last week. I believe Burrow was under pressure on 48% of his snaps. Now that Cincy O-line is a complete disaster right now. But that's just something to keep an eye on. They blitzed 60% of the time. Doesn't mean they're going to do it in this game, but they do certainly try to go at that. But then you kind of look at the season overall, John, and it's not just an issue of the defenders in the backfield. It's not just a secondary issue. they take the second longest time to get pressure in the NFL. Their time to pressure is 2.8 seconds. You give any quarterback 2.8 seconds on average to sit back there in a game, they are going to dice you up in some way. And so this pass defense has definitely been an issue, but the pass rush has also not been very good. And so I think that is definitely something to think about. And it's kind of crazy, right? Because I talked about how they had their time to pressure is 2.83 seconds, but they have the fourth most quarterback pressures in the NFL because they blitz so much. And so there's a lot to think about there. But man, they allow a significant amount of explosive plays. They don't match up. I don't think their secondary particularly matches up very well against the Steelers' um, wide receivers, specifically Williams, Austin, and Pickens as a trio, because you specifically are going to have to put, I think, Marlon Humphrey probably on George Pickens. I think that is the matchup you'd want. But if you put Brandon Stevens on Calvin Austin, that is a mismatch the Steelers are going to want to hit, right? But so you put Stevens on Williams. That's a mismatch you're going to want to hit. Like, there are mismatches that they can hit. I don't necessarily, Roquan Smith hasn't been great this year. And if Kyle Hamilton's out, I think then Pat Frymuth is a significant issue. In terms of EPA per play, the Ravens have allowed the second most EPA per play for tight ends in the NFL this season. This could be a big Pat Frymuth game. This offense, the Steelers offense should be able to move the ball on this team, and they're a really good run defense. In fact, they're a top 3 run defense in basically every metric. They allow the least yards per game. They allow I believe the seventh least yards per rush. No, they're first in that too. So they are first in a lot of these, in the run defense, but their pass defense has just been so porous that it has become a significant issue for them. So I expect a pretty high flying game. I think they're going to be able to score on the Steelers defense too. I just think there's too many weapons. And I am concerned about some of the crossing routes, the missed opportunities the Commanders had, and I think they're going to replicate a few of those. But listen, the Steelers have been able to force Lamar into some mistakes. And in high flying games where both teams could score, a pick or two can really be the difference. You learn that the Steelers fans should know this from when Big Ben would go off for 400 yards but throw 2 picks and they would lose 45-42 in some of those games. It can be 1-2 mistakes that throws it off. And Russ has played really clean football so far. The Steelers kind of have a really decent, I think, idea of how to hit these moon balls. And I think, the Ravens play so much man because they blitz so much that I think the Steelers have a chance here to kind of get going. And so, man, this is going to be a high-flying game. It's going to be really fun. This is going to be the big test for the Steelers for the ceiling. This is a really, really high-powered offense. It's not a great defense for the Ravens. If they could win this game and go 8-2 when Cleveland comes on Thursday Night Football, the Steelers are set up for shop. Really, honestly, they are set up to do to have a really nice run here over the next few weeks. So we'll see how this all goes out. But I think it should be a really fun game. This feels to me, this is the first time. Obviously, these games have been really close, but this is the first time in a long time that this feels like a proper Steelers Ravens matchup for the sole division lead. It's the type of feeling you want, and so again, I think it's going to be a big time game. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be hard fought. Again, would not surprise me if the Ravens win this game. I think they're a phenomenal team. They've had some puzzling losses to the Browns and the Raiders this year, but I think this should be a really fun game for the Steelers. But I point to those games against the Browns and Raiders and show you that is why they should be concerned about their pass defense. Gardner Minshew and Jameis Winston carved them up. So, Russell Wilson and George Pickens. George Pickens, if you see whatever the over is on his metric, dude, slam the over. I think Pickens is set up for a huge game in this one.
There you have it, Steelers Nation. These two teams are poised to return this fantastic football rivalry to greatness. How it turns out? Well, we'll break it all down next Tuesday on your Steelers Breakdown Podcast with Nick Farabaugh. Till then, go Steelers.